A global women's land rights campaign dubbed Stand for Her Land is championing for these rights.
We need to invest more in transforming some of these norms, in transforming some of these practices and make them more progressive so that we can move to the next level, so that we can eradicate poverty, so that we can have increased food security, so that we can have gender equality, but also very importantly, so that we can have climate resilience.
The Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, estimates that closing the gender gap on land ownership could increase the yields on women-owned farms by 20 to 30% and reduce the number of hungry people by 100 to 150 million people.
It is desperate. It is drastic. Some people just give up and live in their own situation. And you know what happens? The next generation, then that woman's next generation, and the likely one, the one after, they will not go to school. So they remain in that basic level of poverty.
While more countries have made progress putting in place policies and laws guaranteeing women's land rights, advocates say more work is needed before women like Beatrice Kigandi can enjoy their rights.
And now to matters health, where a total of 18 people have tested positive for coronavirus from a sample size of 4,287 tested in the last 24 hours. The positivity rate is now at 0.4%. Total confirmed positive cases now stand at 323,237 cases. 4 patients have recovered from the virus. Total recovers now standing at 317,527. No patient died today, fortunately. The COVID-19 cumulative fatalities still stand at 5,647. A total of 17,244,756 vaccines have been administered. Of these, 7,889,436 being fully vaccinated and 7,944,436 are partially vaccinated. Now with the COVID statistics, we take our first short break right here on KUTV Primetime News. Stay tuned, we'll be back with a discussion of the day where we look on opinion polls. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
KUTV, in conjunction with Kenyatta University Funeral Home, is now offering death announcements immediately following on news bulletins at 7 p.m. At this sorrowful time, as you share in your grief, allow us to communicate your announcement of your loved one on KUTV in both Kiswahili and English. For more details, kindly inquire at the KU Funeral Home Service Desk or call 0736 928 380 or dial 020-359-9054.
Kenya kuna aina tofauti za hali ya anga ambazo huboresha au kuwa changamoto kwa wakazi wa eneo. Kaunti ya Makueni imeibuka kuwa bora katika masuala ya kilimo licha ya hali ya kiangazi.
Maembe huwa tunazalisha nyingi, lakini mtambo kuna ile capacity ambapo hawezi pitisha na hatuwezi chukua maembe yote. In fact, tunachukua 5-6%.
Kaunti hii imejikakamua kwa udi na uvumba kutegua kitendawili. Ukambani kuna ukame.
Tambo maji ilikuwa ngumu kupata kiasi kwa sababu kama ni pale kwa mto inapita tu inaenda. Lakini sasa hii kama imesimamishwa itakuwa rahisi kwetu.
Basi kikosi cha Boresha Kilimo kilitangamana na wakulima mbalimbali kuandaa Makueni County Edition.
Na wahimiza wana Makueni na Wakenya wote kwa jumla kuitazama kipindi cha Boresha Kilimo kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 6:30.
This is magic. I need that magic.
Somebody call 911. Anything for your girl, give me more.
Nasema shughuli wagli den den den.
Mwenda wazimu naye kupitapita kwake ghafla akamwona mtu ambaye kwamba amewekwa katika kiti, anasukumwa, anaingizwa katika hospitali. Kisha naye akasema, heri mimi ni mwenda wazimu, lakini yule ambaye kwamba anasukumwa yuko katika kiti, mimi niko na afadhali, kwa sababu hali ambayo kwamba inampata yule ni ngumu zaidi kwa sababu ya maradhi ambayo kwamba yuko nayo. Kisha ghafla akakuta jeneza linapitishwa, mtu amewekwa ndani yake. Naye akasema, heri mimi niko na afadhali ambaye kwamba niko katika kiti lakini bado niko na pumzi, ninapumua. Mfano huu unatupatia mazingatio gani? Mazingatio kwamba hali ambayo kwamba uko nayo, shukuru na umhurumia yule mwingine ambaye kwamba yuko na hali mbaya zaidi.
Welcome to On Fleek, where we flow flawless and serve you the latest gossips,
bring you the current and latest fashion trends.
Talk to you about current life issues,
bring you guests related to lifestyle.
Do not miss out our show. I'll be your host, Stacey Atieno.
And I, Joy Nyambura. Don't miss out. Bye.
Welcome to the empire, Far East, because we find true love. You will see what your love has done for me.
Kenya kuna aina tofauti za hali ya anga ambazo huboresha au kuwa changamoto kwa wakazi wa eneo. Kaunti ya Makueni imeibuka kuwa bora katika masuala ya kilimo licha ya hali ya kiangazi.
Maembe huwa tunazalisha nyingi, lakini mtambo kuna ile capacity ambapo hawezi pitisha na hatuwezi chukua maembe yote. In fact tunakuta tunachukua 5-6%.
Kaunti hii imejikakamua kwa udi na uvumba kutegua kitendawili. Ukambani kuna ukame.
Tambo maji ilikuwa ngumu kupata kiasi, kwa sababu kama ni pale kwa mto inapita tu inaenda. Lakini sasa hii kama imesimamishwa itakuwa rahisi kwetu.
Basi kikosi cha Boresha Kilimo kilitangamana na wakulima mbalimbali kuandaa Makueni County Edition.
Na wahimiza wana Makueni na Wakenya wote kwa jumla kuitazama kipindi cha Boresha Kilimo kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 6:30.
Welcome to the empire, Far East, because we find true love. You will see what your love has done for me.
Mwenda wazimu naye kupitapita kwake ghafla akamwona mtu ambaye kwamba amewekwa katika kiti, anasukumwa, anaingizwa katika hospitali. Kisha naye akasema, heri mimi ni mwenda wazimu, lakini yule ambaye kwamba anasukumwa yuko katika kiti, mimi niko na afadhali, kwa sababu hali ambayo kwamba inampata yule ni ngumu zaidi kwa sababu ya maradhi ambayo kwamba yuko nayo. Kisha ghafla akakuta jeneza linapitishwa, mtu amewekwa ndani yake. Naye akasema, heri mimi niko na afadhali ambayo kwamba niko katika kiti lakini bado niko na pumzi ninapumua. Mfano huu unatupatia mazingatio gani? Mazingatio kwamba hali ambayo kwamba uko nayo, shukuru na umhurumia yule mwingine ambayo kwamba yuko na hali mbaya zaidi.
Welcome back to the broadcast, and just to remind you, we are streaming live on YouTube at KUTV Kenya Live, and also feel free to engage with us on our social media handles. We are at KUTV_Kenya and KUTV Kenya on Facebook. And now to our day's discussion, where they are streaming in 146 days to the August polls, that is opinion polls, surveys and studies that claim to have a statistical representation of the public opinion on various matters. And with the political climate as it is on the possible election outcomes, now can they be trusted? With some doubts on how organizations are run, with some skeptics accusing them of being influenced in one way or another to induce a desired perception to the masses. Well, enough of the qualms, as I am joined by one adept with these matters, Dr. James Sierra from Kenya, County Lead from the Senior Data Analyst at Twaweza East Africa. Dr. Sierra, welcome to the broadcast tonight, and thank you for making your time. And in case I have not introduced you accordingly, feel free to just introduce yourself to the viewers.
Yeah, I think you have done some, whatever you've said is the right thing. Yeah, I work with Twaweza East Africa. And allow me to say something about Twaweza.
Yeah, you can just see to that camera right there.
Twaweza is a regional organization. We have offices in Tanzania and Uganda. And mostly we focus on governance issues. And in particular, what we do is to raise citizens' voices.
I'll raise your mic.
Yeah, because in most cases, citizens are not heard. And unfortunately, like in 2022, I think citizens have been given first priority because it's known after the election. They elect some people in, it's like a reward, and then after that, they are forgotten. And one of the reasons why we normally elect a government is to improve on service delivery. So that's why we normally come in so that we can be able to bridge the gap between citizens and policymakers, such that they can be able to encourage them to discuss. If something is not going on well, we raise citizen voices, and then they are heard by the politicians and policymakers. So from there, it's quite easy for them, for the policymakers to understand the problems they are going on, they are going through, so that they can be able to help them in terms of improving on service delivery.
Okay, so yes. I'm getting like opinion polls are meant to like gear fast forwarding and more clarified view on public delivery of services to the public, yes?
Yes.
And could you give us a rough idea of the processes that are involved in actually compiling such data, because there is concern on how it is come to. I believe like it's a scientific method that is applied, and maybe you can be able to shed more light and also give us a rough structure of how, like in undertaking your procedure as a data analyst, how you actually engage and actually break down this whole process so that you're able to come up with data which can actually be used by the public and actually be influential to the masses.
Allow me to start with a very simple example. Suppose you suspect that you have malaria. So what do? You go to the hospital, they send you to the lab, and allow me to ask you this question. Do they remove all the blood to test for malaria? It's just a simple question. Do they take all or remove the blood?
Yes, they do.
They remove all the blood.
Not all, a sample of your blood. To
ask yourself why they have to get just a sample, because there is that element of representation. As in the blood that has been obtained from your hand is the same blood that is on your toe. So what does that one tell you? Doesn't mean that you have to remove all the blood for you to get to understand what's going on in your system. So a sample is enough. Now, coming back now to the data, it's the same thing. Now, unfortunately, like in Kenya, you have so many regions. You have people from Kisii, Kisumu, cost and all that, and they have different opinions. So what do you do now to ensure that, as is, you know, it's the same principle. One is representation or representativeness. So you have to have some voices from all over the country. So one thing that you need to do is to segment the country into some section.
Can you raise your microphone?
Yeah, KNBS is so good in that because there is no way you can work alone. You have to have them involved because they're the ones who have segmented the country into some. We can normally call them the smallest area. We call it animation area. Is a region or a small area that has between 100 and 200 households. So out of this, so we do some sampling. Okay, we have several levels. Like you have regions, you cut them, and then from there, you pick the animation areas. Then from there, you do another sampling. And why do we have to sample? Going back to what I explained before, if you remove all the blood, chances are high that you're going to die the next moment. So it's an expensive activity. But when you remove a sample, you can't even know that some blood was removed from your system. It's the same thing. So if you start now doing talking to each and every person, that's a census, and you know how expensive it is. That's why you normally take 10 years for another census to be done. The same thing, but now we have this service whereby you want to know what's going on within a very short time. So can you be able to reach everyone in the whole country? No. So you have to take a sample. One, their budgetary aspect. There is also an aspect of time. So that's why you have to go to pick a few individuals. Now we have some statistical theorem. Allow me to take you to statistics 101 about standard deviation, mean, and all that. And there's a few people, have a colleague of mine who asked me, now you're still in statistics, you haven't been able to estimate X. You know how it is. So basically that's how it is. So when you have this sample whereby it has to meet some threshold value, for instance, if you have like a population of like 10 million, so we have some statistical methods that we apply, and then you're able to know that when I have a sample of 2,000, that's sufficient to represent what that is happening in Kenya. Another thing in terms of distribution, so these individuals have to be distributed across the country. So that's one thing. So there's that element of representation issue. The second one is on how big the sample size is, because sometimes it can be quite small. And another thing, there's that margin of error, which I don't know. Like for instance, like let's say that from a sample you get that like 75% of Kenyans have already registered. Now, if you use the appropriate methodology, it's going to have a plus or minus something. So how do you reduce that? So the population has to increase for that error of margin to reduce. So if you pick a small sample, like you're supposed to have had like 2,000, and then you decide to pick like, let's say 1,000. So if the margin of error for 2,000 was plus or minus 2, then the one for 1,000 will be plus or minus 10. You see now in terms of certainty, there is some level of variability. Or as in, because it's between like if it's 78, then it has to be like 68, and then on the other side it's 88. So the right value is in between. So one thing is there's that element of accuracy, and that's why you have to have the minimum sample size. Then I've also talked about the representation. Then after that, we have another level whereby the sample that you have picked, you have to compare that sample, or the statistics, or the sum of the basic statistics. One of them, or one of the indicators is like gender, age distribution, urban rural distribution, and all that. So you have to compare your sample with the census data. You already have them. We have them on the website. So out of that, then you have post adjustment, because one, you can't sometimes not avoid to have a biased sample. You might be so accurate, but you end up, it's a matter of probability. You have done that.
Yes.
It's like we have the 95 confidence. So that's such that when you sample like 100 times, 95% you're going to be right, but you have a 5% that you might be wrong. So we have to do further adjustments. So when you make those adjustments such that when you tabulate some indicators or some statistics from the sample, they must reflect what is in the population. So by doing that, you are sure that whatever have within the sample is a representation of what we have at the national level based on the census data. Yeah, so I think I have been able to explain
Yeah, you've actually answered several of my questions, but I'm coming to the fact that some of the studies that you choose to survey on subjects that usually have maybe a lot of controversy, a lot of interest, public interest specifically. Now, how do you handle, like, currently I've seen, like, with the surveys that you've carried out, for one reason or another, you've veered away from the mundane opinion polls on elections outcomes. You've looked on another angle where you've actually even involved a body, the IEBC, to, like, give it findings on a certain matter. Yeah. Now, when you release findings, because I'm sure that's the only, like, survey you've ever done, when you do release surveys and you find a lot of, like, skepticism among the public on how it was come to, how do you handle such? Because let's say it's an election poll of matters, like now you're looking on a wider spectrum, like you'll have to be like the spokesman of several polls companies, I'm sorry. But now how do you deal with such a situation where there is skepticism about the data that you have actually presented?
Allow me to talk about Waweza. One thing that we normally do, okay, we don't dwell much on who is leading candidate, because as you have put, there are a lot of interest. One, it's a very expensive exercise. You know how much they have been invested into this process. So at least they will be happy to know, well, is the message that I'm passing across resonating with the citizen, the people I'm targeting to elect me. So that's the main question. So you do whatever you want to do, and you know there are ways to influence the figures. I can even do the sampling and influence such that they can speak the language or tell the citizens what I want them to hear. So it's easy also to cheat using the statistics. Now on the other side, but now if you are transparent enough, as in you show how the sampling was done, how the sample size was calculated, how the adjustments were done, and someone can be able to pick your sample, you have put it there for people to see, that you have documented the methodology. So any other person can come and check and see, oh, this is what he did and all that. With that kind of transparency, there'll be no issues. But as I've said before, there are a lot of vested interest. Both, you know, someone can come and give me some money and torture this data until it tells people, it say, oh, it can be able to amplify my story. We call it data torturing, because you can do a lot of things and then whatever you want it to tell you, it can tell you. But now, will it be of any benefit to wananchi? As I've told you, we are like there to amplify citizens' voices. And that's why, like Waweza, we have run away, or we don't like polling on who is ahead or who is behind. That's not of interest, because whoever gets into that position, he has to deliver to wananchi. So at Waweza, we normally try to run away from that, because it's not something fundamental for us, because if our interest is for citizens to benefit, whoever comes or whoever will be the president have to deliver on that. So one thing that we normally do, and I think if you can visit our website, you see there are so many topics. Like last time we had a survey on taxation, how are Kenyans happy on issues to do with tax. We had a lot of studies on COVID in terms of vaccines, how citizens perceiving the Ministry of Health, whatever messaging and all that. We also did something on for the agenda, the government for 4G.
Big 4 agenda.
Big 4 agenda. We also had something on agriculture, livelihood and all that. So a host, an area of like topics and which we think of interest. So what we normally do, we normally go out there, you know. For instance, like this year, we are mostly going to do on elections. Like the one that we had recently, we engaged IEBC, you know, they had this voters registration exercise.
Yes, they did.
And they wanted to know what are citizens saying about the process. You know, it was a heavy investment. So we involved them as in terms of designing the tool, because you can't just do it alone. You have to have a stakeholder on board so that we can be able to address the issues at hand or that of interest to them, because they are the consumers of the information. So able to run out and tell them that citizens are saying this and this. Then you have to make some adjustments. You have to do this, you have to target the youths. For instance, that's what we found, that youths are not willing to register and all that. And in terms they have morale is so low and all that. So, you know, it was now upon IBC to get back and to the drawing board. What should we do for people to be positive about the forthcoming process. So by doing so, citizens are happy because if IBC was not willing to have most polling stations, they're going to add more and all that. And I think by doing so, wananchi will be much more happier than the way they were before. So you can see now why we come in is to be able to amplify if citizens have complaints. Now we can now bring IBC on board for them to get to hear what citizens are saying. We allow them to have a dialogue, and then after that, some issues are well resolved.
I'm seeing a very innovative way of actually handling the polls more than the characteristic traditional way of this is how it is happening, this is what is happening. As in, I'm seeing you involving more bodies to try and air this out.
Yeah,
now,
even like the one that we had about COVID, the Minister of Health was part and parcel of
that's
the
very
process.
wonderful, because I'm seeing like it's a move that is quite positive for opinion polls. Now, before we close, in a very short moment, there is a question about how such organizations are run. Could you like give us a rough idea of how you actually funded, how you actually operate? Yeah, in less than 2 minutes.
That's a bit difficult, but
just a rough idea.
Twaweza is funded by several organizations. One of them being Hewlett, we have Ford Foundation. Wellspring also fund us. But when it comes to basically what they, after we receive the funds, we are the people who decide on what to investigate. So we have that liberty, as in we have that mutual understanding between those who are funding us and the organization, given that we understand what's going on in Kenya, because their main aim is to promote democracy and rule of law. So it's now upon us to be innovative, to get to know, now we have been given this amount, and you have to be accountable. You know, sometimes they are also watching, you have to send reports and all that.
What you do?
Are we moving towards the right direction? Have we been able to represent citizens in the way they would want it to be? What are other people doing? Like we have other CSOs doing ABCD, but mostly on our side, we are there to collect information. We are there to provide evidence. Like what I was telling you, like with IBC, they had a rough idea that something seems not to be going on well. But when you came on board, they had now hard statistics.
They can pinpoint it exactly.
Exactly. This is what is happening. Yes. And now the other thing is, because they also have to ask, for them to be on board, they have to scrutinize our methodology. And sometimes they can say no. I remember we have to apply for so many clearances, like these ethical boards, because when you're dealing with anything to do with health, you have to be subjective.
Very true. So they have the best data possible.
Exactly.
Yes.
They have also to scrutinize how you are doing the sampling, how even the questions, how you are framing them, because I can ask you a question in a way that will favor, as in with an intention for you to respond the way I want. So they have even to look at the tool to get to see how it looks like. And basically, even our funders have to go through, for instance, like whatever we collect now, we put it on our website, such that whoever want to have a look at what we have done can be able to access the methodology and also the data. So we try a level of best to be as transparent as possible.
Now, on a general wrap-up as we close, give us a view, because there are skeptics about polling companies.
Exactly.
There are people who will have issues with them, and you do interact with the media, because for you to actually air your data, you will require more of the media. That's where we come in. And in like a minute, as we close up, I would like you to give us, or rather talk to those who are worried of these researches that come out.
Basically, what you need to do is to interrogate the methodology, because out of it be quite easy for you to get to know is whatever this person is trying to tell us.
But we are looking at people, because not everybody is able to actually look and analyze the methodology. How do you break it down to someone who's like on a normal level?
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult, because if I want to cheat, basically what I do is to, as in, twist the methodology, of which I think we need to have some basics for us to claim, because there's no way you can claim something is not good without evidence. And the evidence, how do you generate the evidence? One, you are not there when these questions were being asked. That's one thing. You are not there when they went out to ask these questions. Whom did they approach and all that? So basically, it's something scientific that whenever you do or you engage yourself in such a process, you have to document everything. So, and even when we publish papers in these review journals, so what do? You submit your paper. Even sometimes they even ask for the code because they were not there when you were doing all this. So they're able to go through. So one thing is you should not be judgmental by saying, okay, it's so and so who made this, as in such and such poll said A, B, C, D. If you cannot be able to get to the methodology and be able to assess or understand how it was carried out. So it's upon us to, even if it might be a little bit difficult, to go through the document and be able to make such a decision.
And is there a body, a government body, that actually looks over all the polling companies, or do they operate liberally?
No. As in, even when you want to conduct a research, even at the university, you have to apply for a research permit.
So you go through the same maze?
Yes, you have to go through the same, because you have to submit, you have to document everything. This is what you intend to do. And then you submit, and then you get comments that now you have to change this and this and this. Like on our side, we have to submit that, whatever, we have to make that application. Then if you're working with the ministry, they also have subject us to their standards. So we have to submit all the documents. They have to scrutinize that. For us to be able to work with you, we have to understand how your methodology is and how you're going to carry out the surveys and all that.
And where do you find your data after you've actually do you post it on social media? Do you?
No, we normally put it on our website. Yes, so it's available. All the surveys that we have conducted, when if you Google Twaweza, East Africa, you'll be able to get all the data sets for Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Because all that we are doing in Kenya are the same thing that we're doing in Uganda and Tanzania.
That's very,
and another thing, and allow me to say this, we have also not have been in the right books in some areas or some countries, because sometimes you say what's not something against the government, as in this is what the citizens.
And how do you handle that? Because there are some forces which are quite powerful.
Yeah, it happened. Allow me not to say where, but it has happened. But now we have to stand for the truth, because if you have the data with you, hata wakisema nini, you just tell them now, here is the data, here is the methodology, now tell me what should I do.
Yeah. This is how I worked it out. This is how I got the answer.
One thing is, data can't cheat. Yeah, if you have to run like a tabulate, you have to do a multiplication. 2 multiplied by 4. It's no, it will be 25. It will always be 8.
Numbers don't lie.
They don't lie at all.
Thank you.
And that's why in most cases, and allow me to say this, you'll really see some of companies running the polls sharing this information. They rarely do that, because they know if someone scrutinizes the methodology, we raise a few questions. For instance, like what I've told you, if I receive some data and they said we polled on this and this, so what I do is just run simple statistics, look at gender, how is the distribution. It's known that men wako kama 49 and women whatever is 51. So when I just run a simple tabulation, gender, when it gives me, like for men we get it's 25, for women it's 75. Whatever is there is trash, as you say, garbage in, garbage out. So if they can't be able to match those figures with the census, then I think whatever will be out of that data will be trash.
Very, very, very informative, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time actually to be here. We are very appreciative. I hope you have learned something, and if you've not, catch it up. Go back to YouTube at KUTV Live Kenya. You'll be able to follow up this interview and others that are very much more. But first, we go on to our stories of the day, where the Department of History, Archaeological and Political Studies at the Kenyatta University held its monthly seminar today, centered on the theme Decolonizing African Studies, where Professor Toyin Falola of the University of Texas and Austin was the chief guest, delivering a lecture on the subject.
African studies is the systematic scientific study of African people and the institutions, culture and history. Decolonizing, on the other hand, is defined as the freeing of minds from colonial ideology. Decolonizing African studies refers to movements in liberating African studies from Western academic traditions.
We are going to have that.
Professor Toyin Falol of the University of Texas at Austin delivered a lecture on the subject at Kenyatta University, where he cited the power of labeling in colonizing.
You find the birth of underdevelopment and dependency theory, the rise of Marxism, major developments of the 70s, the Makerere School in Uganda became very influential in Marxist thinking, producing major intellectual figures.
The professor pointed out the need for decolonization, saying that Africans need to use their culture in eliminating colonization. Falola added that we should use the African cultures and add value to them by coming up with African music and films.
Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is at the edge of decolonization. It's at the moment where we are today. It is the frontier of knowledge. Do not collect your degree without understanding Afrofuturism. If your teacher don't teach you, go and teach yourself. It has become a movement in literature, a movement in music, a movement in performance.
Here are the views of Kenyatta University students on the event.
With the lecture from Professor Tohin, we can actually see as a history student, we need to appreciate ourselves. We can see how the Eurocentric scholars have painted us having no development, having no change, and even having no history. From this perspective, as he was rolling out, we can see at the end, he brought out industries like film industries, things like the music industry.
From this lecture by the distinguished history professor, whose research interest focuses on African history, it is clear that decolonizing African studies will be beneficial to Africa as a whole. Mutweri Eliud for KU TV.
Thank you, Mutweri Eliud, for that entertaining story. In fact, and we'll take a short break right here on KU TV Primetime News. Stay tuned, we'll be back with more stories.
I do basically basic photography. Nafanya family portraits, nafanya birthday shoot, nafanya engagement shoot, nafanya weddings, nafanya vitu mingi kwa photography juu zote nimetrainiwa na other people, my mentors wenye wako huku nje. Sasa mimi nafanya makeup na nafanya photography.
And now into the world of sports, where top golfers are set to tee off at the Nyali Golf and Country Club for the 11th edition of the Johnny Walker Golf Series that is slated to kick off on the 19th of this month. Over 150 golfers will be eyeing to qualify to play in the semi-finals of the Eagles Round tournament to be played at the Muthaiga Golf Club in May.
After the 10th leg played last weekend at Thika Sports Club, all roads head to Nyali Golf and Country ahead of the 11th leg of Johnny Walker Series set for this weekend, with over 150 golfers set to battle it out for glory.
This is a great opportunity, and we are happy to be given this opportunity to everybody to Scotland and John Walker. We're happy about it, and we are trying our luck.
For Bernard Mureithi, Joseph Nduchi, Ruku Njuguna and Paul Nduati, who scored an impressive 140 points to emerge winners of last edition's leg, eyes will be on the bigger prize as they hunt ticket to play at the iconic Glen Eagles golf course in Scotland.
The ultimate in every golfer to go to courses out of the country and being able to meet other golfers and experiencing different golfers and different courses. So it is it's a nice gift, it's a nice prize, it's an ultimate for any golfer.
Well, a lot of guys are excited to qualify for it. I know it's going to be tough. I saw my teammates suffering in other 4 balls. So, I mean, everybody is excited about it. So we are looking forward to qualify. But many are invited, few are called. Let's wait and see.
The four-ball Stableford format will see the top 3 teams qualifying to play the semi-finals of Eagle Round tournaments to be played at Muthaiga Golf Club in May. Johnny Walker Golf Series, which aim to create more avenues for positive interaction, giving an opportunity for local golfers to compete with a view of increasing the standard of overall local game. Auma Evans for KU.
Bandari FC registered their 3rd consecutive win in the Football Kenya Federation Premier League as they beat visiting Nairobi City Stars 1-0. Hassan Abdallah scored the only goal in the first half, connecting Benjamin Moshe's cross with a powerful header into the back of the net. In another KPL clash today, Brian Eshihanda's sole goal aided top-toppers Kakamega Homeboys to bounce back to their winning ways after a 1-0 win over local rivals Ulinzi Stars at the Moi International Sports Centre, Kasarani. Posta Rangers rallied from behind to beat Mathare United 3-2 in an entertaining clash, while the Kakamega Nzoia Sugar continued with their resurgence under the new coach Sally Mbabu by beating bottom-placed Vihiga Bullets by a solitary goal. Now, Tunisia, for the 2nd time in a row, will play host of this year's Men African Club Championships. Kenya will be represented by the National Champions General Service Unit, Kenya Prisons and Kenya Ports Authority in the 13-day volleyball extravaganza, which will run from the 5th to the 18th of May. The 3 booked their slot after they finished in the 1st, 2nd and 3rd positions respectively during the 2021 Volleyball Federation's National League. The Confederation of Africa Volleyball